What's up, everybody? Welcome back to Allsmith. Today's guest is a husband, a father, a well-known sports agent, an author, and a keynote speaker. He's the host of the Pro Mindset podcast and just released his book entitled Pro Mindset. Today, I'd love to introduce Craig Domann. What's up, man?
Bryce, thank you so much for having me on.
Joining us all the way from Germany. I appreciate you moving the chess pieces around to accommodate the time change.
No problem.
You've done some cool things in your life. I'm very thankful to have chopped it up with you a little bit offline, but the world of being a sports agent, man, like how in the world did you land on that? And I'm excited to unpack some of the sexy stories that I'm sure took place in your career that started back in 1990 when you were just beginning.
Yeah, so being a sports attorney is really fun, except for, when you have one client going against another in the game and you don't know who to root for. You've got two dudes in the Super Bowl. One's an offensive lineman, the other one's a defensive lineman, and they're matched up against each other. And both families are kind of curious, who are you pulling for? You on our side, you on his side.
I wonder about that often with Rich Paul, who's the lead sports agent for Clutch Sports, and he's LeBron's guy, and he's got so many guys in the league. It seems like every deal that's signed, it's like, oh, this deal was negotiated by Rich Paul. The entire league is basically playing against each other. I don't know how he does that.
He's almost got to back away and just say, hey, man, good luck tonight. He doesn't get emotionally connected to their outcomes or their results. And he basically tells them, I got your back. I'm going to support you. I'm going to advocate for you. I'm going to protect your rights. I'm going to be there for you. But what happens on the court is all on you.
It's very well said. What are your thoughts on, there seems to be a little bit of a discrepancy. We see it also in the world of fitness. There's managers, there's agents, there's lawyers. They all kind of get mixed and matched kind of into the same category and categorized as an agent. To give a little bit of transparency and education for people that are maybe on the outside looking in, how does one get involved in that, and what gives somebody the right to kind of negotiate and read through contracts and whatnot?
Let's start with the attorney side first. When a player gets in trouble, he's going to call an attorney. The agent's going to set him up with an attorney that practices in that area of law. Sometimes if there's a relationship that's developed, that player may ask his agent to have that attorney do some oversight on some language. Otherwise, that attorney's going to stay in his lane or her lane. Then the manager is the day-to-day. I mean, there's a lot of things that are taken care of for players when they're in college. They don't have to go out and buy furniture, if they're staying at the athletic dorms. They don't have to do a lot of that setup. They don't have to do, they've got people that do things for them. They go to an academic advisor, make sure they go to class, gets their papers turned in, things like that. Where in the professional ranks, the manager's that person. They order the furniture. They get the car detailed. They trade in the car. They handle all. To me, that's the day-to-day stuff. And then the agent is usually an attorney, but doesn't have to be. It's all football. And yes, it can bleed into other areas, but it's football. You've got a contract. You've got to protect your client's best interests related to that contract. There are provisions in that contract that allow the teams to get out of paying the players money. You have to know what those are so that you protect them. It's almost like playing chess, so that when the team, wants your player to practice when he's not healthy. Why are they doing that? Because once they get him on film in one session, one play, one rep, he's deemed to be healthy. They can pull him off the field and cut him. But if he's got $30 million on his paragraph 5, which is the base salary, and he can't play for the year, and it's a season-ending injury, he's getting 30 mil for doing nothing but rehabbing. So that one play could potentially be worth $30 million. So as an agent, you
So
have to tell your,
interesting.
yeah. So you have to give your guy heads up. This is what they're going to try to do. And they do.
Yeah. It's so interesting, just the business within the business or the game within the game. And then you have to take into consideration the media and how they play a role. And what comes to mind for me, Craig, is I think back to Isaiah Thomas, 5'8" maybe, and was averaging, I think, 27 or 28 points a game for the Boston Celtics a few years ago. And they were in the playoffs, and he ended up having what they categorized originally as a quad contusion, or later said was some sort of hip injury. I think he missed a game or two. And then for the love of the game, and because it was, I believe, I don't think it was the finals, but I think it was like maybe the conference finals. And he comes back, and he's a step slow. For a guy to be 5'8" and a step slow, he was eligible for a $100 million max contract at that time because he played and they got that film. Later that year, he was released by the team. Now he's been on one-year deals kind of bouncing around the NBA, but he was one of the best to do it that year, and it goes into exactly what you just said. Had he been a little bit more patient and not stepped foot on the court, he would have had that max deal. And it just shows, like, it's not always about the love of the game anymore, and these players get scrutinized. I mean, it happened to Kawhi Leonard as well with his quad injury when he was with the San Antonio Spurs, and he didn't want to play. He didn't want to play, and there was arguments between the Spurs and the Kawhi Leonard camp. But now hearing what you're saying and knowing the provisions and the specific language that's in some of these contracts, I mean, think about it in any other job. You think anybody that's working as a CEO of a company or base salary of $30 million, you think they're going to pass up on that by making a poor choice? I don't think so.
I think the other thing, Bryce, is that from a fan perspective, we think we own these players. And we think that we bought a ticket, they should play every time. And when they play, they should play their best every time we show up at the stadium or the arena. And what people don't understand is that they aren't 100% most of the time. And as the NBA season transpires, when you go through once you get to the middle of the season, the NFL season, these guys are all banged up. There's 100% incidence of injury for every NFL player every single season. Not ACL, not necessarily season ending, but there's injuries all the time.
Oh, yeah. They're incredibly banged up. Can you help people understand? So in the MLB and the NBA, you have a lot of guarantees within these contracts. In the NFL, you don't. A lot of these contracts are not guaranteed. I've loosely heard from some of my friends that have played in the NFL. It really stands for not for long. From my understanding, the average career is 2 to 3 years, or maybe even 7 games, if you dress. Can you help people kind of understand that a little bit? Because these are top 1% athletes in the world. Incredibly strong, incredibly agile. I mean, these are 6'5", 300-pound guys running, sub 540s. And sometimes I think it gets misrepresented. Like every time they go out there, they're putting their life on the line.
I think it's supply and demand. It's one of those things where on an NFL team, there's probably 5 or 10 irreplaceable players. For the Chargers, Justin Herbert he's the franchise. But let's take some of the other players. Maybe it's the second string tight end, the backup center, maybe the right guard. These guys are interchangeable, and so they don't have the leverage. And so the way the NFL's been moving for probably the last 10 years, since the 2011 CBA, is there's more money going to the best players and there's more guarantees going to the best players. But for the other 40 guys on the roster, they're getting less money. There's no middleman anymore. There's no like middle class in the NFL anymore. Either they're making 50. I mean, how is it that 3 quarterbacks signed this offseason for over $700 million and have won 1 playoff game collectively?
Wow. Who are those quarterbacks? Justin Herbert being one of them.
Trevor Lawrence.
Oh, yeah, I saw that.
Trevor Lawrence was one of them. And then Love from the Packers.
Oh yeah.
And then I'm blanking on who the other kid was. But it's like they all, oh, Tua
Oh yeah.
with Miami. So those
Miami
guys
Dolphins. Yep.
together they got over 700 million, and they've won one game.
Yeah. That's
So what's
wild.
happening is they're all leap, and the next quarterback that gets paid, the system is flawed. What happened to the middle class? Where's 30 million at anymore? Where's 40?
Mm-hmm.
Couldn't Miami get him for 40 million a year? Couldn't Jacksonville get him for 40? They haven't done anything
It's
yet.
a really interesting question for sure. Like they're also signing deals for like 10 years, which I mean, obviously Brady showed the longevity potentially of a quarterback, and they're not getting banged up as some of these other guys. But it does pose a question of just like, are they making these investments based on potential? I don't know. I haven't seen proof of concept yet, and that raises my eyebrows a little bit as to why these contracts are so big. And it's interesting, you being a sports agent and more on the inside than me, kind of saying the same thing. I want to ask you, it's a little bit of a tangent, but I believe his name is Mike McDaniel. He's the head coach of the
Dolphins.
Miami Dolphins,
Yeah.
right?
Mm-hmm.
He cracks me up, man. He like when I've watched him on Hard Knocks, and like he's just this like swaggy like goofball that just is a genius when it comes to not just offensive schemes, but it seemingly he instills true belief in his players, and he's a mastermind at building relationships. Like he gets in there and dabs these guys up, and he's just like in there like he's one of the players, and he looks like a young guy that plays video games. And it's so entertaining for me to watch him out there just like being a mastermind in his craft. And free is the way to be. Life beats us up a bit and causes some bumps and bruises, but that doesn't mean we have to stay on the sidelines. This is why we've partnered with Kinneon Labs. Get back to doing what you love with this incredible portable device designed to get you back in the game. Kinneon is on a mission to move people from pain to possible with their top-rated red light therapy and laser solution, which tackles inflammation along with muscle and joint pain quickly and effectively. What I love is that it's portable and rechargeable, making it easy to actually incorporate into my everyday life consistently. It's small and lightweight, so you can throw it in your gym bag or work bag, or even an overnighter. Kinneon's lasers and LED combo make this cutting-edge device extremely versatile for use with general aches and pains, as well as chronic back pain, arthritis, post-surgery recovery, endometriosis, and more. This has been an amazing tool keeping my elbows and knees pain-free for pressing, pulling, and squatting in the gym. Great tools like the Move Plus give me the freedom and flexibility to continue living life on my terms without limitations. There are a lot of reasons why over 15,000 people are using this device and rating it 4.7 stars and above. Head on over to kinneon.io and use code Allsmith at checkout to begin your pain-free journey.
Well, Mike's beginning was in Cherry Creek High School in Denver, and I believe he went to high school with Kyle Shanahan, and that was the open door that got him to a ball boy for the Broncos in training camp many moons ago. And then he kept following the Shanahans around. But the thing that I can say about Mike was he faced some demons, personal demons that he overcame. And through that experience, he learned that he just needed to be him. So you got two choices when you're a coach. Try to be who you think you need to be to have this persona, this bravado that you thought your whole life that's what you needed to do to be like a Super Bowl champion coach, or understand that God created you unique. Can you be who you're created to be? Can you be authentically you, unabashedly you? And that's what he does. And you can't knock people that just are them. I don't care how squirrely they are, how goofy they are. You still like them because they're like, oh, that's so-and-so. And that's why he connects with the players.
Yeah, it's cool to watch, man. I'm a big fan of it. So going back into the agent world, man, you started back in 1990. What was your educational journey, and what was the spark that brought you into wanting to be a part of a sports agency?
I think one of the things that all of us do is we respond to failure. We respond to something that we wished would have happened differently. My college football experience was a bench warmer, and my way out was sports. But then when I hit my head on the glass ceiling when I got to college, and so when I got out in the real world as a CPA, I was like bored out of my mind. I was like, man, I cannot push paper. I can't be in this little cube. And Tom Watson, he was during the Jack Nicklaus era, was one of our clients
Okay.
with our firm, and his agent was his brother-in-law. And I'm watching this dude have the time of his life. And I'm like, so I started looking into agency stuff back then and found out you needed to have a graduate degree, went to law school. But the spark for me was that I didn't get to live out my sports dream. I didn't have a happy ending to my football career, but I got an opportunity to be a dream coach for my clients to help them achieve their dreams. Because every little boy has a dream, whether it's basketball, golf, it doesn't matter the sport. And, you being a basketball guy, you dream to play in the NBA, being the next Steve Kerr or whoever it might have been. And it's like, everybody's like that. Well, as an agent, you get to be, in lockstep with your client, helping them achieve their dreams and helping them see their blind spots and coaching them on how to deal with coach relationships, unexpected obstacles and adversities, injuries, all the different relationships with girls and family members. So it's quite broad, the spectrum of the things you do, but it's all in the mission of helping them accomplish their dream.
No, that's very well said, man. Something that I'm curious about here is, at one point you mentioned you were working with 55 athletes. As you mentioned, within that scope, it's not just the X's and O's of a contract. It's not just money. You're working with the human being here. And it sounds like you truly take that into consideration. With that many people and you on the cusp of being a father, being a husband, like how were you able to kind of set boundaries for each one of these clients, not have crossover and bleed over, and allow yourself to have some Craig time?
Okay. I failed miserably at that. Miserably. When I was on airplanes, I was missing my family. When I was with clients, I was thinking about my kids. And then when I'm with my kids, I'm thinking about my clients. It's a miserable existence because that's part of my pro mindset mission is be where your feet are, be focused. And the reason why I know that's the best way to operate is because I didn't do that for several years. And then I figured it out. And I was able to be in the moment with my kids. There was one year where I had like 10 guys at the NFL Combine in Indianapolis. I flew to Indy for 3 or 4 days, came back and coached a tournament in Denver, and then flew back to Indy to finish up the Combine. So it's like I made a priority. So when I was one place, I was there. But when I was being a dad coach, I was there.
That's really cool. What's some of your secrets there that you maybe share with people via the pro mindset to be able to compartmentalize things? I mean, is it turning off the phone? Is it a meditation? Is it some sort of mantra? Like what's the secret to put those blinders on to truly be where your feet are? Because it's easy to say that on a podcast. It's hard to do.
That's the truth. I think one of the things you have to do is your clients will call you at 2 a.m. if you will answer at 2 a.m.
So you teach them how to treat you.
Yes. Once they meet your family, you don't hide your family. Once they see you have young kids and you've got a life outside of being an agent, they're normal people. They don't want to interrupt everything. So I trained my clients when to call me. And I also knew when they needed me. It didn't matter what the boundaries were at that point. So there's key moments like training camp time, the month of August, you're on call 24/7 because anything can happen at any time. Once you get in the season, it's more weekly. There's a weekly rhythm to the season. If they come out of the game unscathed, I mean, when you call up a client after a game, you don't go, "Hey, bro, how'd you play?" No. How's your body? How are you doing? Because you care about their health. And so depending on if somebody's going through something, you answer that person's call every time. But if everything's going well, you know what? You train that player to call you at the best times for your schedule.
Totally. What does the system kind of look like? Do you have like a running document for each one of your players at that time? Do you have an assistant that works for you that helps document some of these things? Because it sounds like it could be very difficult for all these things to just be playing ping pong in your brain while you're also trying to negotiate contracts. And, let's say one client is injured, another person popped for PEDs, another person is going through a divorce, and another person is fighting their coach. Like being able to have all of those in separate boxes, be present and available and helpful and holding space for each one of those separate conversations, with you being one guy and kind of the straw that stirs the drink for each one of those. What does that process look like for you?
When you first start out, unless you work with somebody, and I started out working on it by myself, you create protocols for those things. And then you start seeing patterns. And you can really put this client in this category. And then he's through that season, and then he's in a different one. And so when a player's going through an injury, there's a protocol. It's you're coaching them up on, you can always see what's going to happen next. And sometimes there's a why in the road. It's not a definite, it's going to be this. It could be A or B. And you share with them, hey, the team wants you to be B, but you got to be mindful that if you go down that road, like playing like Isaiah Thomas did, it can backfire on you. It can cost you money. So I had this conversation with my son today because he hurt his back in practice yesterday for the Titans. So I walked him through. He's got a back injury. He needs to have a timetable that sets him up so that he can play in preseason game number 2. But if he's not healthy, I don't want him playing because then it could backfire on him. But he can't just show up every day for treatment and hope he gets better. No, you got to understand how healthy you have to be. So the coaches will practice you before the game so they can justify playing you in the game. Because you can't just show up on game day and say, "Coach, I'm ready to go." They're going to go, "Hey, man, you haven't practiced all week. We're not playing you." And so these games are huge windows of opportunity for these players. So they got to be able to show up on those days. So the protocol is different for every player, different for every injury, but you got to be able to communicate with them what's coming. And so when you talked about getting divorced and all the different life scenarios that could happen, you walk them through, hey, you know what? This could, is there any possibility for reconciliation? It'll save you 50% of your net worth right away. Can you remind yourself of the zillion reasons why you committed to this woman in front of your family and friends? And is that still true? Or is all that stuff not true anymore? And you're basically a life coach because sometimes players are just like, they don't want to deal with conflict. They don't want to deal with like reality. They just want to sweep it under the rug and move on. Well, some of the best relationships are the ones where there's been fractures and you've reconciled and they become stronger, whether it's with a coach, a spouse, a family member, a friend. So it's really, it's like the 100-meter, the 100-meter race in the Olympics this last week.
Oh yeah, Noah Lyles.
The guy that won didn't. The guy that ran the fastest didn't win.
Mm-hmm. He didn't get his chest across.
Yeah, he didn't lean into the finish line. Noah did not lead the whole race except for like the last 2 or 3 inches.
Yep.
Because he leaned in. So I ask people all the time, what are you not willing to lean in about? If you want to win, you got to lean.
It's interesting because I think so many high-level athletes lean into what becomes unconscious competence. Right in the beginning of their athletic career, it's conscious competence. They're learning the skill. There's some paralysis by analysis. And then through reps and sets, time under tension, and just repetition, they're not thinking anymore. And it almost becomes, the sport becomes escapism from real life, because they start to experience success, especially the athletes that you're talking about that require an agent later on in their careers. And so when life starts to happen, the tool that works, or the axe for them that's been sharpened, is, you know what, this will just solve its own problem. I'm going to go just play the sport. That's how I know to problem solve. But then what happens later on in life, the problem's still there. And if you don't have the right people around you, the right money managers, the right agent, the right family, the right friends, I mean, we've seen it time and time again. We've seen so many athletes fall into the trap of the nightclubs, to fall into the trap of, no, that's my homeboy. Like, he's been with me, since 8th grade. And that's the guy stealing from the bank account.
Oh, yeah.
And time and time again, we end up seeing, Lamar Odom's probably a good example, where he makes it to the peak. He's one of the best players in the NBA, crushing it for the Los Angeles Lakers. For a time, had his own TV show with Khloe Kardashian. And then it comes full circle that, like, his father was involved in drugs. He later had some challenges with drugs. He's got all these friends around him. He's got his father and people kind of bleeding things, and inevitably starts to lose all of his legacy wealth, or what was legacy wealth at one time. What are some of the conversations you have with people around their close-knit circle? Because that can be one of the most dangerous things, because they're people you've trusted your whole life. And then later on, when money starts to get involved, the psychology of people just starts to change. It gets a little bit weird. What do those conversations look like for you, and what are some of the pivotal key advice components that you share?
Number one is making them aware that the people closest to them sometimes will get things worked. They feel like they're owed. It could be the parents spend a lot of time and money training their athlete son or daughter, and it's like now they finally hit the lottery. And just making them aware that some people are going to stick their hand out. The most practical thing you can do, though, is to make sure they have a financial advisor in place and let that person be the filter. They're the financial advisor. They can communicate the no's. Like, hey, I love, your homeboy from high school wants you to put $100K in just to make it your restaurant. They'll name it after you, but you don't put that money in his pocket. And the restaurant's never going to work. And then you're going to have a fractured relationship with that person. Is to have anybody that wants you to invest in any of their pet projects, submit a proposal, a business plan, and let the financial, maybe it's a legitimate opportunity. Great. But if it's not, you don't have to say no to mom. You don't have to say no to your best friend from the 3rd grade. A financial advisor is going to step in and say, hey, we have a plan that your son or your friend is committed to. And if we take $100K and divert it over here, it's going to deviate from his plan. And I don't think that's fair to him. And that's the most important thing.
That's really smart. So it creates like a mediator or a buffer to step in and have some of those harder conversations, so it doesn't become a convoluted relationship of a he said, she said. You don't believe in me. You don't believe in my business plan. You've got so much cash, you don't even know what to do with it. And it doesn't become that. I think that's really, really cool advice. Have you watched the show Ballers before with Dwayne "The Rock" Johnson?
A couple times.
How realistic is that, with him kind of being the money man? He screwed it up originally and developed a tough reputation, and then came back and was trying to do right by the players. What are your thoughts on how that show kind of portrays money management in the NFL?
I think it's very accurate. I think that players that even have financial advisors, the breakdown is they don't listen to them. So there's two parts to a message: the intention of the sender and how it's received. So I could even say something to you today in this podcast, and I intend it to be a certain way, and you receive it differently. It lands differently than I expected. Mm-hmm. So what happens is financial advisors can build these firewalls. They can have these wonderful plans. And the player says, I'm going to go to the car dealership and buy my 6th car anyway. Okay. Now I can only drive one at a time. I got 6 and only 7 days a week. So now, like, it's like they think they can drive a different car every day. And the
Mm-hmm.
financial advisor is saying, hey, bro, you only need one. You only need one. You get sick of that one, let's trade it in, get another one. Or maybe, depending on location in the country, you need a winter vehicle and a summer vehicle. So, hey, go ahead and get a convertible and get an SUV. But you don't need 6. But when the players don't listen to the people that have the wisdom to help them the most, that's when harsh realities show up.
The Trident family taught me something really important this last year, that we are all a bundle of stories, both good, bad, and everything in between. All of their cold brews remind their customers that they are part of something bigger than themselves. I start my day with the Sweet Cream Cold Brew as I am prepping my mind and body for fitness, service, coaching, and podcasting. With various locations in San Diego, they offer over 14 nitro cold brews and a variety of specialty drinks. You can find the perfect brew and pair it with one of their treats from the Keto Bakery. You can check them out over at tridentcoffee.com and use code Allsmith to take your coffee experience to the next level. Yeah. It's so interesting too, because when you're at your peak and you're doing all the right things, you're at the right place at the right time, you're in this unique flow state, maybe in the NFL, you're throwing a bunch of touchdowns, or you're getting some interceptions, or you're catching touchdowns, or you're getting that block, or you're getting that deflection. When you're doing it and you're in like a hot streak and you have that internal feeling of like, oh, my next contract's going to be big. Or if you're like a 2-year consecutive Pro Bowler and you kind of get used to over the course of time, these 6-figure checks coming in monthly and kind of this lavish lifestyle. And as long as you're performing, right? What's the famous mindset? If it ain't broke, don't fix it. Just keep riding the wave. But then you start to get older. Then those injuries creep in. Then you play for that coach. You don't really fit in the system anymore. Or there's people around you and like you don't really jive with them, and that same cut or that same angle you were taking previously isn't really working the same way it once was. Now the media is on your back. You start to spiral downward. Then there's a social media component as well. Now those checks are a little bit less, but the lifestyle is the same. What does that look like for you? Is that a narrative that maybe you see relatively frequently that maybe is like a really important component of like almost getting the money to the point where they can't even touch it? Right? Like maybe there's a percentage that goes to the tangible player's hands or into his checking account. But then after that, it's like, put this in investment accounts, put it in different places where like you don't even see it. I would almost want to do that and just let my money work for me, and then just try to have just, an allocated sum to live, a little bit of play money, and then obviously some money if I needed to help out people close by, but like not enough where it would like bleed long-term wealth.
I see a couple of things, Bryce. Number one is, yes, there's gold diggers, but most of the time, the significant other saves the player lots of money.
Oh,
When guys
interesting.
get married, yes, if they don't have a prenup, they can lose half of it, but they know where they're going every Friday night. They don't have to go to the clubs. There's some they've got an accountability partner built in.
Mm-hmm.
And ladies sometimes are thinking ahead more than guys are. They're thinking, hey, he's not going to play forever. We've got 3 kids. Hey, we got to keep this money going. We got to get our money working for us. So I feel like the most stable players are the players that actually have a spouse, as long as it's not a gold digger. The second thing I would say is that when it comes to getting their money to work for them, they have no idea what that concept means. Only people that come from money understand that concept. 95% of the population does not understand that concept. They don't understand passive income. They don't understand that, hey, if I can go without and put this money, invest this money, it's going to pay me for the rest of my life. So there's really 3 things you can do with your money. You can blow it, You can spend it, or you can invest it. Players are only typically in the spend, which is buy a house, buy a car, something they can see, or blow, go on a nice vacation. All they have is the memory. Very few players and very few people, by the way, not just athletes, have that space in their mind where, hey, X% is going to investments. Could be a shopping center, could be an apartment complex, it could be stock portfolio, passive income. That's not something we learn in grade school, middle school.
No, not at all.
Right?
Not at all.
So people don't know unless family passes it down, or unless they get connected to a financial advisor that they trust that will teach them those concepts.
For sure. When it comes to the pro mindset, how do you educate people around just this social media culture of immediate gratification? I put the post, I'm getting the likes, I'm getting the shares, I'm getting that like dopamine hit and the high fives and the hugs and the pats on the back, virtually, of course. And then this concept that we're discussing with investment, which is delayed gratification, where you're maybe putting a big chunk down and then it takes time to then collect profit or see the gross revenue increase over the course of time. You can't really see it until you can see it later on. What does that look like, and how do you kind of metaphorically paint that picture in order to create buy-in with some of your clients?
Bryce, the number one thing is everybody has a story, and we perform and make decisions in alignment with our story. And unless we change our story, we can't change our circumstances. And so number one, it's a game of performance. Professional sports is a game of performance. If a guy is performing at a higher level, he's more valuable to his organization. He's going to get more money in free agency, or they're going to take care of him before he hits the market. So it's about helping the players rewrite their stories. A lot of times the story they have got them to the league, but it's not going to keep you there. That's why you see a lot of first rounders that stick around for 2 years. Teams finally give up on them, and now they're kicking to the curb. The average length of an NFL player is 3.3 active games. That's it.
Gosh.
Tom Brady screwed up the whole statistics. He played in like 389 games. So think about how many guys didn't play in any for that average to be 3.3. A lot of players never play in any. There's only been like 11 players in the history of the NFL that have played in one game. Just one game. Mm-hmm. One of them trains my son in the offseason. He got hurt in his first game. Made it as a rookie. He was a draft pick. Made it. First game, horrible knee injury. Never played another game. Oh, so the thing about pro mindset is let's focus on your story. What is your story? What are your demons? What's the lie you're believing about yourself that only shows up? The beautiful thing about sports is your true identity doesn't show up until a big moment. So it's free throw at the beginning of the game doesn't show up. It's when the game, you're down one with 1 second on the clock. Maybe it's a 1-and-1. You make both, you win the game. What do you got now? That's a different, same size ball, same basket, still 10 feet high, distance still 15 feet. Everything's the same. There's no wind, there's no weather. Yet, when it's at the end of the game for the world championship, or it's in a preseason game at the beginning of the first quarter, those are not the same shots. That's when your story shows up. So I focus on the story.
Very well said. Yeah, for sure. It's so interesting to pause and really, really put myself in those situations and really listen to what you're saying, because physiologically it feels different. You get a little tighter. There's a little bit more meaning, right? That famous Robert Ory quote, pressure can bust a pipe or pressure can make a diamond. Mm-hmm. And then, the best athlete is typically the most relaxed athlete, the one that's a little bit flowy. I mean, we've been seeing it in track and field. That runner last night that came back in the 400 meters in the final little
Amazing.
bit, he was so loose and open with his stride, cheeks jiggling and just like nice and relaxed in his flow. Everybody else tightened up and got that hamstring glute lock in the final 15 meters. And he comes back to win. And I mean, that's a crucial moment, right? Like, who are you going to be in the final 50 meters of the 2024 Olympics that everybody here has made every sacrifice known to man to become every ounce faster that they could be? It's just really interesting that you verbalize it as the story, because I definitely agree. And I've heard people talk about it before. They mentioned the word abracadabra. And our world thinks of that term as, magic. But it's actually Aramaic for with my word I create. And it's not just the verbal word, the spoken word. It's also the words that you're saying to yourself in here.
Mm-hmm.
And so at the onset, when you pick up on maybe a story that's not helping a player succeed, and maybe they're married to old ideology of like, Craig, why should I listen to you? I went from A to B doing it my way. And now you're helping educate them. Well, if you want to go from B to C, you can't do it that way anymore.
Right.
What does that look like? How do you create like this opportunity to allow for change? Or do they have to fail and hit some sort of adversity to be like, okay, I learned my lesson the hard way. It's not working anymore.
Here's the thing. Every athlete that's made it to the pros in every sport, every Olympian that's been over in Paris, they've all failed. Maybe they succeeded in Olympic trials, otherwise they wouldn't be in Paris, but they've all failed. And so what I do is I walk my clients through their sports history, their performance history. And, what was your biggest disappointment in sports in high school? Maybe they won the state championship 3 times in a row, but they still have disappointments. They still have failures. And I asked them what they were thinking during that time. Let's go back to that moment. What was the emotion attached to that failure? Maybe they had a sleepover the night before. Maybe they were hungover. Maybe something that they had control over manifested on the court or on the field. And they regret that. And we go back and revisit that. And then I talk to them about all of us have a pocket voice, which is like an inner critic at the free throw line. I mean, basketball used to be my favorite sport. And I would say money before the ball was out of my hands to the guy in my face, because it was it was my confidence coming out. Did I make every shot? Heck no. But it was my swagger. And so that was my inner voice. It wasn't. And then there's times when I've been on a court where I'm like, hey, I probably don't deserve to take the shot. These other guys, these 2 guys are really, really good. I'd probably just give up the ball. And I find it humorous as heck that this happens in the NBA, happens in NCAA tournament, March Madness, games on the line, 50 seconds to go, 2 or 3 different possessions potentially. And they literally they dribble, they stay on the outside, and they dribble and hand off, and nobody wants to take the shot. Next thing you know, there's 18 seconds to go, and they force, the shooting clock's going down, and they got to throw it up, Hail Mary pass or Hail Mary shot. It's a joke, bro. Who's man enough to step up and take the J? There's maybe only 50% chance it goes in, but who's willing to take the shot? That was what was awesome about Kobe Bryant.
Oh yeah.
Michael Jordan. They wanted to take the shot. A lot of these NBA guys don't want to take the shot. Mm-hmm. So to bring this around to answer your question, I walk them through, what is your pocket voice telling you? Let's rewrite your story by reframing what your pocket voice says to you in critical moments. So pro mindset in a nutshell is how to be your best in your biggest moments. You can be your best in your biggest moments. You can definitely be your best in the first quarter. You can be your best in the exhibition game. The question is, can you be your best when the game's on the line, when you're in a contract year, and if you make it or don't, 20,000 or 80,000 people go home happy or pissed off? And are you already thinking about what you're going to say to your teammates and your coaches in the locker room if you don't make it? What are you going to tell your wife, your girlfriend, your mom and dad if you don't make it at dinner after the game? How are you going to go partying at the club with your boys if you don't make it? That's what your pocket voice is going to tell you before you even take the shot. So if you can't
What's so
train
interesting about the pocket voice is like, it sounds to me, it's almost like going up to bat and you're thinking about trying not to strike out as opposed to trying to hit a home run or get on base. And I love the concept that you've shared about reframing and really just being like, okay, you're going to have the same outcome whether you make it or miss it, but how you think about it is different. And I loved the specific speech from Kobe where he was like, bro, we're not that important. Nobody really gives a shit. Take the shot. Trust in your ability and all the lifetime reps that you've put in up until that moment. Or as both of our good friends, or mine and your good friend, Anthony Trucks, would say, we've done too much work in the dark to not shine in the light.
Bingo.
Right?
Yeah.
That's cool, man.
I want to share one other thing, Bryce. You being an athlete, being a former hoopster, I've created this concept called performance bubble. And when you go into a game, you need to create a performance bubble. And in that bubble is everything that's for you, and everything that's not doesn't get to come in. So fear of failure doesn't get to come in. Doubts don't get to come in. The fact that the coach mother effed you last practice or last game doesn't get to come in. Social media commentary doesn't get to come in. What the guy that's covering the team thinks of you doesn't get to come. If it's negative, it doesn't get to come in. What your teammates are saying doesn't get to come in. I could go on and on and on. Doesn't get to come in. Here's the only thing that gets to come in. Belief in who you are as a man. Confidence in what you do. What Anthony Truck said, putting in the work. What Kobe Bryant and Steph Curry did and do. They worked their butts off. How many millions of shots have they taken? They could close their eyes and make that three. That confidence gets to come in. And then peace gets to come in from all the noise and distractions. And from that recipe and that safe headspace, you manifest flow and zone and all the things that allow you to play free and have just like exude like freedom to move. Think about guys that shoot air balls and free throws. You don't think they can shoot it 15 feet? No, they tighten up. All they did was tighten up. Why do quarterbacks throw the ball in the dirt? Same reason. They're squeezing the ball. They're not relaxed. That's what makes Patrick Mahomes special. In the biggest games, he's the best. He's in the flow. He's in the zone. I don't even know if he even understands the concept performance bubble, but he's a master of doing it.
Mm-hmm. It's almost interesting that, I guess in some ways, ignorance is a bliss, right? Or it's just like, when I watch Patrick Mahomes, he's poetry in motion. Him and Kyrie Irving a little bit, they're just out there dancing, playing, as if they're just in the yard, like screwing around, making TikTok videos. They're just so fun to watch. And I've heard you talk about it a little bit around, I think you said the first step to shifting from overthinking into flowing is awareness. But I think for some people, especially the really smart athletes, too much awareness leads to that paralysis by analysis. And so how do you kind of figure out the push and pull of awareness and integrating this thought ideation of shifting people from overthinking into flowing?
Wonderful question. When you create your performance bubble, you have to put boundaries on where your mind's going to go. If you're thinking about the next play, if you're thinking about the last play, if you're thinking about, like, hey, depends on what kind of defense they show up. We're expecting cover 2. They show up in man free. No. It's more of a Bill Belichick, do your job. Be dialed in on what is your job. What is your responsibility? And when your awareness gets out of control, you've gone from the arena of what what is within when your mind goes out of control because of your awareness, you've gone out of the space where you can control. You've gone into the uncontrollable world. Mm-hmm. All you can control is you. If you're a quarterback, all you can do is make an accurate pass. You can't catch it. You can't control the defense. So it's setting boundaries on what you actually can control.
Move fast and break shit. LSKD develops functional sportswear with a streetwear aesthetic that's on a mission to inspire you to chase the vibe through sport, fitness, and adventure. I train daily in the rep shorts and love the versatility they offer. The zipper pocket is an absolute game changer. I go from training at the gym directly to meetings, running errands, or prepping for podcasts. The LSKD tribe has become true family, and we are excited to continue to develop our community. Shop now at lskd.com and use code Allsmith. We chase the vibe here at Allsmith. Let's all become 1% better every day. I love the way you said that, and I'm so happy you said Bill Belichick. I was watching, what's his name? It was Gronkowski chatting with Julian Edelman. And Julian Edelman was telling this funny story how he always loved wearing these red gloves. And Belichick would be like, Edelman, what the fuck are you doing? Like, those things don't match our uniform. Like, why are you wearing red gloves? And he's like, you just watch, coach. I've been catching the ball nonstop with these things. They're sticky. They fit in my hands nicely. Well, later that game, he gets a fucking holding call. And Belichick just rips him a new one. Get rid of those goddamn red gloves. I told you those things were a problem. The other team's jerseys are like white, and you stand out like a sore thumb. I thought it was just the way he recalled it was just so cool that Belichick was so old school, just like you said. What's in your control, what's not in your control. The color of your gloves is in your control. Just go to the equipment manager. He's going to toss you a brand new pair. Probably get you the same pair in a different color, and then they're fine. But instead, you had to be a hothead and wear the red ones, and it was fine until it wasn't fine anymore. And I just thought that was such a great story that he shared.
Well, a lot of offensive linemen like to wear gloves in the same color as the team they're playing. So the officials can't really tell if they're holding or not.
Yeah, totally. From your experience being a football guy, it's hard to tell. Like, you're getting underneath the shoulder pads. You're obviously trying to block, but it's so difficult to know. Like, it's obvious, obviously, if you're grabbing a jersey or, like, grabbing a collar. But sometimes it's tough, like, to really tell. From your experience and your knowledge in the sport, like, what education would you give to just normal fans as to how to spot a holding call from, like, an offensive lineman?
In the NFL, they're taught to only call holding at the point of attack. So if it's a holding on the other side of the line, let's say the run is outside zone to the right, and there's a holding on the backside, but it has nothing to do with the play, the officials are not supposed to call it. Now, if it's grievous, and they probably would, but in normal operation, they will not. Yeah. And then it's when the defender is trying to disengage and is being held from disengaging is when holds are called. So as long as you keep him in your cylinder and you're between you and the runner, they never call it. And it is holding, but it's legal holding. But as soon as that defender wants to, like, move out of the cylinder right in front of me, and you don't let him, it's holding.
Got it. Dude, it's so cool to kind of pick your mind. You're obviously on the inside. You're doing some really cool things. And we briefly chatted offline around the famous sports agent. Well, not sports agent, but the famous agent for Vince in the show Entourage being Ari Gold. And you said you didn't watch that show because you lived it. And you were navigating all of the peaks and valleys that come with negotiating contracts, keeping your players out of trouble, trying to understand their lives, trying to create boundaries, teach them about the performance bubble, teach them personal finance, and, like, kind of co-pilot their journey towards their version of peak expression. Are there any deals or specific contract negotiations that stand out to you that really, like, lit a fire under your ass that you're like, whoa, that changed my whole life going through that experience?
Absolutely. I was living in Salt Lake City in 2002. I had a client that the team didn't want to keep in free agency because they wanted to keep somebody else that they valued more. And I just kind of took the approach that, hey, we'll just go to free agency. There was no communication between myself and the team. And like 2 days before free agency hit, I got a call from a reporter that said, hey, they're not going to sign the first guy. So it looks like your guy may be the priority. So they call me and I said, hey, I'll listen. Send me your offer. So their offer was low. So I basically went crazy in my head that I'm just going to say, what the fuck? I'm just going to send them the craziest offer I can send them. So I 12 times the signing bonus. I like 6 times the total pay. I did all this stuff. I just basically, and the guy flipped out on me. I didn't have nothing to lose because like we're free agencies in 2 days. So if they didn't want to sign him, we'll go hit free agency. So I ended up getting like 7 times the signing bonus, like 4 times the package. So it was one of those things where it opened my eyes that the power of leverage. I had if I would have had any conversations with that team that I initiated when they didn't want my client, I would have got no action, no traction, and I would have set myself up for failure when they actually did need him and did want him. But by me not communicating with the team and allowing them to come to me, and then when they made me an offer, I was just like, what the F? I sent them crazy numbers. I got the best deal because they didn't have time on their side. The leverage shifted from them to my side. So I think it taught me very clearly that it isn't about how smart you are. It isn't about how great your client is. It's how much leverage your client has. And when is that point in a season or in a negotiation where your client's leverage is going to peak? That's when you need to strike a deal.
Sounds to me that magical things typically happen when there's time and when there's space. And then when there's no time on the team side, they end up kind of clusterfucking their way into making deals in order to fill out the roster. And that allows you to be at the right place at the right time to then think, you know what, that's a low ball offer. If you don't ask, the answer is always no. I'm going to toss something out here. And you were able to kind of meet in the middle with you guys kind of getting a little bit of the upper hand. And sometimes when there's a big problem, it sounds like one of the best things you can do is wait rather than being reactive and desperately, trying to seek, pick me over here, get me the contract. Sometimes you just wait. And, in many cases that seems to work out pretty well. What are some of the intangibles or character attributes that you look for when you're deciding if you're going to represent an athlete or not?
That's a wonderful question. It's evolved over time. It's changed a lot. There's no question you want the talent, and you want a guy that is going to put in the effort, put in the work. But I look for identity now. I look for identity because you can take two equally, similarly talented players that both are badass, hardworking son of a guns and get two different results. One could be a Hall of Famer. One could be a two-gamer. And it really boils down to how do they see themselves? It is very, like, you're a good-looking guy, you're young. If you were in a situation where somebody didn't see you the way you saw yourself, how would you respond? Could you show up the way you authentically are when other people don't see you the way you are? That's professional sports. Coaches never see you like you are. There's never a congruence between how a player sees himself and how the coaches see him. And how are you going to respond in that situation? I want the guy that's going to hold on to his value, stand in his worth, believe in who he is, despite the fact he may be lower on the depth chart than he expected. He may not be getting the playing time that he was thinking he was going to get. He's going to still learn the playbook like he's going to be the starter, even though he's not even close to starting. Those type of players end up, I mean, Tom Brady was that guy.
Yeah.
199th pick, 6th rounder. He got drafted by a team that just signed Drew Bledsoe to the highest contract in NFL history. He was playing behind the highest paid player, but he still showed up like he was the dude. And then when he got his shot, he didn't go in to sub in for Drew Bledsoe. He went in to take over. And he never let that guy back. And they won a Super Bowl.
Yeah.
How many quarterbacks in the NFL today? Let's just assume there's 3 per team, and there's not 3 per team. There's about 2.5, but let's just say 3. That's 90, 96 quarterbacks. Hypothetically, if we have 96 guys that play professional football at the quarterback position that are not, let's say, have not won a Super Bowl, how many of them can have the same mindset as Tom Brady did? And I would say very few.
Yeah. And they may even have it when they're full of piss and vinegar coming off a ecstatic college career. But as you lose that notoriety, you're not in the media anymore. You're not getting paid what you thought you were going to get paid. That confidence starts to dwindle, and that song inside starts to soften until you start to lose that confidence. Like, I think one of the best things you can do as a coach, as a parent, or as an agent even, is just instill belief into your athletes or into your son or daughter. And I think that level of belief is one of the greatest gifts that you can give, because it allows you to do exactly what you said, stand in your worth, even in the most mundane of moments, or in certain situations that seemingly don't feel like there's growth potential or the ability to escape or alter your trajectory. And I just love that you brought up Tom Brady. I love his picture at the NFL Combine, kind of soft in cargo shorts, not really like doing anything that's going to raise somebody's eyebrows as far as athletic potential. But I think people forget that there is this thing in our chest cavity that is pretty freaking strong. And when you're in the right place at the right time, you are able to show some of those attributes that live inside many of us. I mean, Drew Brees comes to mind as well. You know, the famous Rudy story. There is a song inside all of us, and I think in the right situation, that song starts to come out a little bit. And I think this is a great place to start wrapping it up a little bit, because I don't want to take too much more of your time, but I want to talk about your book as we conclude things today. You just came out with the book, Pro Mindset, and you talked about being your best in your biggest moments and altering your story and standing in your worth. What is the book all about, and what are some key things that people can look forward to in reading your book?
Well, one of the things that's interesting about the book is it's reverse engineering 30 years of NFL players, and the guys that were not drafted that ended up playing 10 years, and the guys that weren't expected to be Pro Bowlers that became Pro Bowlers. It's that guy that takes his God-given talent, his work ethic, and his mindset. That's what composes, that's the algebraic equation for every athlete. What scouts cannot measure is the mindset. They can measure the effort, they can measure the talent. And pro mindset is really, it's really your story, your standards, and your stage. How do you rewrite your story so you can change your future? How do you elevate your standards so that when you fall short, you don't have to worry about meeting your boss's expectations? You don't have to worry about what your coach's expectations were, because your expectations are higher than his. And how do you show up on stage being your best self in every moment, not just your biggest moments? And that's by creating a performance bubble that we talked about before. And so when you start looking at this whole framework, you have to first look at what your story is. You shared with me offline that you had a wonderful series of conversations with your father before he passed, getting to know what he was like, you know, what it was like dating your mom, all these things, because he had a life before you were born, which is very profound from your perspective. But you found out his story. Every athlete has a story. Every person has a story. And all of us need some reframing. We need new chapters, because our story has gotten us to exactly where we're at right now. Your story has gotten you to having this podcast, to doing your CrossFit, doing your entrepreneur businesses. As you change your story, you change your future. And then having those higher standards is really how you do what you do. And then your stage is not just this podcast. It's not when you're literally in front of people on stage, like a coach or a preacher or a speaker. No, stages could be a conversation at the grocery store, could be an email, could be a text. Our stages are big and small, and all of them matter. And so pro mindset is really about looking in the mirror and determining how can you be your best so that your story aligns with your dreams, because 99% of us are in storms and our circumstances do not align with our dream. So we have a choice: give up on our dream, which 90% of people do, or hold on to our dream and rewrite our story.
There you have it, ladies and gentlemen. Craig Domann, the author of Pro Mindset. It was such a pleasure connecting with you today, man. Thanks for carving out the time all the way from Germany.
Bryce, thank you very much. And if anybody's interested in checking out the book, they can go to craigdomann.com and pick up their copy of Pro Mindset.
Absolutely. We'll put that in the show notes as well. For those of you watching on YouTube or listening on Apple or Spotify, please rate, review, subscribe, and share with your friends. And as always, stay on the hunt for who you've not yet become. Until next time.